Superheroes have dazzled us for decades, smashing through walls or shooting webs from their wrists while flipping over New York City traffic. But there's a curious question buzzing in the minds of science nerds and comic fans. Could any of this actually work? Is there any truth buried beneath radioactive spiders and gamma rays? Let's swing straight into the skyline of superhero science and zoom in on one of the most beloved characters of all time, your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. In the glorious origin of Peter Parker's transformation, Peter is bitten by a genetically engineered or radioactive spider, and suddenly he's sticking to walls, lifting cars, and sensing danger like a sixth sense. Now in reality, spider bites don't come with perks unless you count swelling and a bad day. Radiation doesn't help either unless you're aiming for cancer, not superpowers. However, genetic modification is a real frontier in science. In theory, it might be possible in the distant future to use gene editing tools to splice useful animal genes into humans. For example, some spiders can lift up to 170 times their body weight. What if you could somehow integrate the genes responsible for that muscular efficiency? While it may sound wild, scientists are already experimenting with gene therapy to cure diseases. The leap from fixing a faulty gene to giving you a spider's strength isn't so crazy. It's just unethical, illegal, and wildly dangerous. Spider-Man isn't Superman. He doesn't lift mountains, but he can easily toss a car or hold up falling buildings. Comics suggest he can lift anywhere from 10 to 25 tons, depending on how emotionally stressed he is. So how might that translate in biology? Spiders have exoskeletons and muscle attachments that give them serious leverage, but Peter's human physiology wouldn't let him get strong overnight. His muscle fibers would need to be vastly denser, more efficient, and more tightly packed than normal humans. Interestingly, in the real world, some athletes possess a rare combination of fast-twitch muscle fibers that make them naturally explosive. Multiply that by 10, and you're on your way to Spidey levels. Also, ants and spiders can lift many times their weight due to scaling laws. Smaller creatures have proportionally greater strength because of high volume and surface area scale. Unfortunately, this advantage doesn't translate when you scale up. If Peter gained a spider's strength pound for pound, his skeleton and joints would need an upgrade, or he would snap his femur the moment he tried to lift a van. One of the most iconic visuals in Spider-Man lore is Peter casually climbing walls like a gecko in spandex. How could this work? In nature, wall-crawling creatures like spiders and geckos use van der Waals forces generated by millions of microscopic hairs in their feet. Each hair branches into hundreds of even tinier structures, maximizing surface contact and letting them stick without glue. Scientists have tried to replicate this. In 2014, Stanford researchers developed gecko gloves that let a person scale glass walls using synthetic hairs. It worked, but only under tightly controlled conditions and required delicate balance. For Spider-Man to do this, his hands and feet would need to be covered in millions of these tiny hairs, or secret some sticky substance without ruining his social life with gooey palms. Now we get to one of the coolest and least explained powers in Spidey's arsenal, the spider sense. It's described as a precognitive ability to sense danger moments before it happens, guiding him to dodge bullets, swirl around collapsing bridges, or avoid banana peels with ninja precision. In nature, spiders have extremely sensitive hairs and slit organs that detect vibrations, air movements, and even the electric fields of insects. Some animals like sharks can detect electrical fields from living things via electroreceptors. Cats seem to anticipate earthquakes, and birds can sense the Earth's magnetic field. For humans, this sounds like a hyper-accurate sensory system and ultra-fast reflex processing. Think of it as a combination of heightened auditory input and real-time threat analysis. Athletes train this to a degree. Baseball players track 90-mile-per-hour pitches with almost inhuman focus, but Spider-Man's version would need a brain that operates like a quantum AI neural net that is predictive and incredibly fast. Neuroscience hasn't unlocked that yet, but advanced neural implants or a genetically supercharged nervous system might one day get us close. Moreover, Peter gets punched, stabbed, electrocuted, crushed, and bounces back, often in a day. He's not Wolverine, but he heals much faster than normal. This could be explained by enhanced cellular regeneration. Some animals like planarium worms can regrow limbs. Humans can't, but we do have regenerative stem cells, especially when we're young. A body that could accelerate mitosis and repair damaged tissues rapidly without cancerous side effects would be a biological miracle. Science isn't there yet, but it's not fiction forever. Spider-Man might have started as a comic book character born from radioactive coincidence, but as technology and biology evolve, we're inching closer to a world where superpowers aren't just fiction. Maybe one day, swinging across the skyline or sensing danger before it strikes won't be science fiction anymore. Let's switch from skyscrapers to snowdrifts and trade web slinging for winter storms. Because while Peter Parker's powers are grounded in gene editing and muscular mechanics, Elsa of Arendelle brings a whole new kind of scientific mystery. Yes, Elsa's powers may look like Disney magic, but there's more science behind her frosty fingertips than you might expect. Elsa's headline act is her ability to create and control ice from delicate snowflakes to massive architectural feats. From a scientific perspective, that's cryokinesis, the theoretical power to manipulate cold temperatures and ice formation with your mind. Sounds impossible, right? Well, mostly, but there is nuance. Let's start with a key scientific concept. Ice nucleation. You see, water doesn't always freeze exactly at 0 degrees Celsius. In fact, pure water can be supercooled, meaning it stays liquid even below freezing until a nucleator gives it a structure to latch onto. That's ice nucleation. In nature, some bacteria like Pseudomonas syringae exploit this. They cause frost damage to plants by secreting proteins that trigger ice formation. Essentially, they can call ice into existence biochemically. Now imagine if Elsa's body could synthesize and emit nucleation proteins, or manipulate moisture in the air to induce freezing rapidly. That's sci-fi, but technically not outside the realm of biology. We already know life forms can control freezing. Some frogs can freeze solid and survive winters using antifreeze proteins. So Elsa's power might stem from a hyper-evolved or genetically engineered ability to rapidly reduce temperature in her environment, triggering nucleation and water vapor and controlling the shape and growth of ice crystals via subtle variations in molecular geometry. It's like sculpting with cold, using the building blocks of nature itself. Here's a strange thing, Elsa doesn't always freeze everything around her. In Frozen 2, she runs across water by freezing it just under her feet. The air doesn't fog, and people nearby aren't affected. For her to generate ice instantly, she would have to remove a huge amount of thermal energy from her surroundings. But cooling air or water that fast would release visible condensation, not to mention require a colossal energy source. One possibility is that Elsa doesn't just passively remove heat, she's transmuting it or redirecting it. Maybe her body contains a kind of biothermal converter that shifts energy away from target areas or converts it into another form. In physics terms, this is endothermic manipulation, absorbing heat and forcing water into a solid state. It's wildly unrealistic without a huge energy reservoir, but let's not forget, the sun gives Earth 173,000 terawatts of energy every second. If Elsa could somehow channel even a piece of ambient energy, she might have the fuel to freeze small sections of water or air on demand. The most jaw-dropping moment in Frozen is arguably when Elsa belts out "Let It Go" and builds an ice castle in a matter of minutes. But is it possible to physically construct something like that with ice? Surprisingly, yes. Ice is structurally strong under certain conditions. In fact, during World War II, scientists experimented with something called pykrete, a composite of sawdust and ice that was bulletproof, strong, and slow to melt. There were even proposals for ice-based aircraft carriers. So if Elsa could control the microstructure of her ice, she could craft load-bearing walls, spiraling stairs, and enormous sculptures that hold together. Plus, ice naturally forms fractal patterns which are aesthetically beautiful and mathematically stable. That's why snowflakes all look unique, but follow the same six-sided symmetry. If Elsa can manipulate those structures consciously, she's essentially an ice architect, designing on a molecular level. Meanwhile, in the Frozen universe, Elsa's emotional state seems tied to the weather. Fear triggers snowstorms. Peace brings sun. Anxiety brings eternal winter. In the real world, our bodies can emit heat, pheromones, even electrical fields. In theory, a person who could amplify and project these could create small localized atmospheric disturbances. But Elsa doesn't just make a breeze, she whips up blizzards which in real life require cold air masses, moisture, and low pressure systems. Controlling that with emotion alone would mean Elsa isn't just altering molecules, she's shaping weather systems. That's climate level manipulation. She would need influence over atmospheric pressure gradients and wind currents on a massive scale. That kind of power goes way beyond biology. We're into quantum field manipulation territory, or more realistically, she's using her emotions to trigger neural pathways connected to some undiscovered elemental field. While Elsa's powers as seen in the films defy many laws of physics, some elements of her abilities have fascinating analogs in nature and science. At the end of the day, Elsa's magic dances with science, but not every superpower flows so gracefully. Some explode past the boundaries of biology and leap headfirst into the realm of pure velocity, because where Elsa freezes time with stillness, our next hero does the exact opposite. He outruns it. In the DC universe, multiple characters have taken on the mantle of the Flash, including Barry Allen, Wally West, and Jake Garrick. They all have access to the mysterious Speed Force, an extra-dimensional energy field that lets them break down every known law of motion without turning into a pile of red mush. Let's just say this up front. The Speed Force is narrative magic. It's the get-out-of-physics free card. But if we push that aside and look at the real-world implications of someone moving at near light speeds, what would actually be required? The Flash can run faster than the speed of sound, which is already mind-boggling, but he often far exceeds that, sometimes moving close to or faster than the speed of light. Now here's the first problem. Friction. If Barry Allen tried to sprint at even Mach 5, the air resistance alone would incinerate him. It would be like running through a solid wall of flaming sandpaper. The heat generated by atmospheric friction at high speeds is brutal, as space shuttles re-entering Earth's atmosphere at Mach 25 glow white hot. So how does the Flash survive? Comic fans will point to the idea that the Speed Force generates a frictionless aura around Barry. That's neat, but let's give it a pseudoscientific twist. What if the Flash's body emitted a high-frequency electromagnetic field that ionized the air around him, creating a pocket of low-resistance plasma, essentially parting the atmosphere before it hits him? That could, in theory, reduce friction and protect his skin, kind of like a magnetic bubble, similar to the plasma sheaths around spacecraft, or the natural magnetosphere that protects Earth from solar radiation. Still sci-fi, but it's one possible explanation rooted rooted in known physics. Here's a fun fact. Running at light speed would require an astronomical amount of energy. We're talking on the level of a nuclear bomb just to make one run. Imagine Barry Allen weighs about as much as a regular adult. To get that much mass moving at almost light speed, the energy required would be so massive it could flatten a city, and he's doing this every single time he runs. Now think about that. Where is his body getting that energy? How is he storing it? A human stomach full of pizza isn't gonna cut it, not even 100 pizzas. His body would need some kind of completely unheard of energy storage system, like a built-in nuclear reactor or access to endless external power source, which in the comics is conveniently called the Speed Force. In real life, a human body can't even begin to hold or survive that kind of energy. It's not just improbable, it's impossible with current biology and technology. But imagining how it might work, that's where science starts to get really fun. The Flash would need a metabolism that breaks down every known biological rule. To sustain that kind of output, he would need to convert food energy to near 100% efficiency, store vast amounts of energy without combusting, and possibly tap into ambient energy from his surroundings. It's sort of like having a built-in particle accelerator crossed with a nuclear fusion reactor wrapped in sneakers. In real life, we have got elite sprinters who can barely run 100 meters at 10 meters per second. Flash is doing that millions of times per second without pausing for carbs. Speed is useless if your brain can't keep up. You can move at Mach 20 and still crash into a wall because your reflexes lag. Normal human reaction time is about 250 milliseconds, but to dodge bullets or vibrate through objects like the Flash, you would need to react in microseconds. This would require ultra-fast neural processing, possibly a quantum-level brain, processing information in parallel, and expanded perception of time. Some scientists believe time perception is tied to how fast the brain processes sensory data. If the Flash's brain runs faster, the world would literally seem to slow down. Could this ever happen? Well, scientists are already experimenting with brain-computer interfaces and neural implants that speed up cognitive functions. We're nowhere near Flash-level thought speed, but it's an area of active research. Here's one of Flash's most outrageous powers. He vibrates his molecules so fast that he phases through solid matter. Is this remotely possible? In theory, if you could match the resonant frequencies of your atoms to the gaps in another object's atomic lattice, you might pass through it, but you'd need to vibrate atoms at near relativistic speeds. It's impossible with current physics, but quantum tunneling, where particles appear to pass through energy barriers, is a real observed phenomenon. The probability of large objects like a human tunneling through a wall is close to zero, but not technically zero. The Flash has run so fast that he broke time, creating alternate realities or reversing events entirely. In Einstein's theory of relativity, time dilution occurs when you approach the speed of light. Time slows down for you relative to the world outside. Theoretically, at light speed, time could stop entirely. So if Flash ran close to light speed, time would move slower for him. That's real physics. Einstein's equations say nothing with mass can reach or exceed the speed of light, but if you can manipulate space-time itself, you might create closed time-like curves. Even if you had all these powers, you'd still have one huge problem. Your body is made of squishy, fragile human stuff. The G-forces from sudden stops and turns would liquefy internal organs. Your bones would snap, your eyes would detach. Unless maybe the Flash's cells are made of smart biomaterials that are able to redistribute stress, regenerate instantly, and withstand insane forces. Some animals, like tardigrades, can survive extreme radiation, vacuum, and crushing pressure. Maybe he's the human version of that, with built-in shock absorbers and hyper-fast healing, or perhaps the Speed Force alters his body's inertial mass, letting him bypass physical consequences entirely. Overall, the Flash is less about what exists now, and more about what if we could bend reality to its breaking point. He's the physical embodiment of every physicist's fantasy. His stories may not be scientific textbooks, but they inspire the real ones.